Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to answer the top 10 questions that folks have asked us about the brand new Mavic Mini. Now, before I get into these questions, I did want to take a minute and thank all of you for the incredible support you've shown the channel and the overwhelming number of questions you've asked us about this particular product, because anytime I put a clip like this together and post it on the channel, I always wonder, did I build in enough technical content? Did I explain the product well enough? Was there value in that clip where other people are going to enjoy it? And the way I gauge that is based on your response to that clip. So if you're asking a lot of questions, you're leaving a lot of comments, that means you're interested in something, because for me, I can't talk about any topic unless I'm interested in it, whether it be a drone or a smart light bulb. I have to be curious about it, I have to get excited about it, I have to investigate it, and then I'll explain the technology in the hopes that you'll find it exciting as well. And the way I know that's working is you're dropping comments below, because the whole reason I started this channel was to relate my experiences around technology to people out there that may be curious about that technology and provide value so you understand if whatever I'm talking about is worth your time and your money. And hopefully I'm doing that. So thank you very much for all the questions. Please keep them coming, because honestly, I was blown away by the amount of curiosity about this particular product. And as much as I love flying drones, I probably like talking about them even more. And nothing gets me happier as a nerd than having a question asked that I don't have an answer for, and I've got to go out and fly a little bit to figure it out. So please keep those questions coming. All right, to the questions. The list I've got in front of me is a list of 10 of the most popular questions. We got hundreds of questions, and I put them all together, picked the most popular ones, and I've got those in this list in front of me. I promise you there'll be other clips coming along that'll explain some of the other ones. And in this list, I've got probably a couple of different ways to answer them. Some are yes or no answers. Others are kind of show and tell things where I'll spend a few minutes talking about it. And then there are others that I can't possibly answer here on the bench. I've got to go outside, fly the drone. Now, two of those, in case you're curious, are, and they were really popular, how noisy is it? And how stable is it in a gusting wind? So I've got two clips that I'm working on that'll show you both of those scenarios. I'm putting this up in the air next to a Spark and a Mavic Air and a larger quad, and you'll hear exactly how much noise it's making compared to the other quads, and I'll actually do a bit of a scientific deep dive to show you on the frequency range what frequencies is it generating, because it's not so much how loud is the quad, it's how annoying is the quad, I guess is the term I'll use. So I'll put all that together for you. As far as the stability goes, I've got it out on a really gusty day in a couple of different scenarios where I've got a camera on the quad and I'm recording video footage. So you'll see how the quad is bouncing around based on the wind sort of buffeting it. And then you'll see how stable the image is inside the actual quad that you're recording. Now, just to tip my hand a little bit here, you're going to be impressed with both of those. So stay tuned for those. All right, down to the questions. I've actually got 13 questions on here because a couple of them are similar enough where I'm going to answer them with the same answer. So we'll start at the top, and these three are all kind of the same. Can I use the Mavic Mini with a smart controller? Can I use it with DJI goggles? And can I fly the Mavic Mini without the controller by just using my phone? Now, the answer to all three of those at this point is no. And the first two are kind of related. The reason you can't use a smart controller and the goggles with it is because the Mavic Mini uses a brand new application called DJI Fly. All the other drones use DJI Go 4. And the reason they went to this new application is they built this drone to be sort of a drone that anybody can fly. So people that haven't flown drones before are curious about flying a drone. And honestly, the DJI Go 4 application is pretty complex. There's a lot of adjustments inside there and things you have to do. And for experienced pilots, they want that kind of control. But somebody that's curious about having a drone and flying it on vacation doesn't want to have to deal with all that stuff. So they built this DJI Fly application to be very simple, very easy to use. But unfortunately, because the smart controller and the goggles are based on Android, and they actually are closed operating systems that are loaded with certain applications, they haven't used, or should say, they haven't installed the DJI Fly application on either of those products yet. Now, having said that, the nerd me can't take that as an answer, so I'm at this point going to be testing how can I sideload those applications. Can I get them working on there? Will the Wi-Fi connect? Because there's Wi-Fi transmitters in both those products. So stay tuned for that and I'll let you know what the results are. But I would not be surprised if in a future version of the firmware for both those products, they don't add that DJI Fly application to it, because a lot of us own that smart controller and want to use it for all of our quads. So stay tuned on that. All right, the phone question is a no as well. And the reason for that, it may seem like a simple thing because it's based on Wi-Fi, but it's not straight Wi-Fi, it's enhanced Wi-Fi. And I'd mentioned that in the clip that what they're doing when you first boot up these two items is the controller is sniffing on that 5.8 gigahertz band. It's sniffing all the different frequencies that it can transmit to the quad on, and it's finding the one that has the least amount of interference and the strongest signal. And then they lock in on that frequency. The problem is when you boot up the quad, it doesn't show up as a Wi-Fi point. So you're not going to see it on your phone because it's got that modified Wi-Fi that's talking to the controller. So even though they're using that 5.8 gigahertz band, they're doing some magical things in there to guarantee that strongest signal, which means you can't fly it from your phone. Now that may change. They may enable that through firmware down the road, but today the answer to all three of those is no. All right, the next question had to do with obstacle avoidance, and this was a really popular question. A lot of people felt like, my gosh, they've had obstacle avoidance on all their quads. Why didn't they build it into this one? Well, the honest truth is, to add obstacle avoidance, you're going to add some hardware to it. So a lot of people saw the leaked photos and thought, okay, there's 2 sensors up here, so certainly it's got obstacle avoidance. But the problem is adding the sensors adds cost to it. And then the sensors have to talk to a chipset that drains extra power and has to be smart, extra programming. There's extra weight with those things are at it. And you wouldn't think that, adding a couple of sensors would really matter. And I'm going to show you in a minute why it does, or a couple of minutes why it does. But adding obstacle avoidance would have been a good thing, would have raised the price, would have made it heavier, would have drained more power, even a little bit would drain power from the battery, so they left it out. The honest truth is, any decent pilot, especially new pilots, is going to keep the quad close to them where they're flying in an area where they control it, and they're going to stay away from trees. And if you're really worried about this thing crashing into something, you can pop the prop guards on it and you'll be totally protected. So for me, I don't think it's that big a deal that the obstacle avoidance isn't in there. And honestly, as many hours as I fly every week, I turn it off more than I leave it on, because it's always annoying me when I'm trying to get in close to a shot and there's a tree branch nearby and it's just beeping like crazy. So it isn't in there. It's not something they can implement later on, so you just take that as it is. All right, the next one has to do with geofencing. Does it have geofencing? I know that the NFZs are a hot topping point on the channel. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to argue about freedom versus safety. You guys know where I stand if you've watched the channel at all. I'm a fan of NFZs. I'll say that again. And the reason I'm a fan of it is, especially with a quad like this that's going to be flown by new flyers, they're not really aware of where they can fly, where they can't fly. And a lot of them are going to buy it, maybe in an Apple store. They're going to pick it up at one of the DJI stores. They're going to go home, charge up the batteries, and they're going to fly this thing. And they're not going to know that they're within 5 miles of an airport, or they're close to a military establishment or a nuclear power plant. Who knows? There may be NFZs out there that they're not aware of. By having those built into the quad, it prevents those new flyers from making those simple mistakes until they become more experienced and realize, oh, there are places I can't fly the quad. Now, having said that, and maybe this is just because I've got beta version of firmware on here, but when I compare this, NFZs and the geofencing, to the quads that I fly every day, like the Mavic 2, I find that the geofencing on this, I don't know how to term it any better than this, but it's sloppy. What I mean by that is, in a field where I know I can't fly because it's NFZs, I just for kicks put this thing down, turned it on, and it allowed me to take off. And I didn't take off, but it would have allowed me to take off in that area, which means either the maps haven't been updated, or maybe there's some restrictions that are lifted on this because it doesn't fly as high or as far. So we'll have to see. I'll do some more testing on that. My suspicion is when the final version of the firmware is out, when this thing's released in a couple of weeks, they'll probably tighten down on those NFZs. But again, I don't think that's a big deal. And all the flyers out there that are going to complain about that and say, I can fly wherever I want, you shouldn't have NFZs. Just think about tens of thousands of these being sold to consumers that have no awareness of NFZs, putting them up, flying near an airport, flying over a power plant, flying near a police station. That's just going to cause all kinds of problems for the rest of us that understand we shouldn't be flying there. So I think putting sort of those boundaries on a new quad like this is a positive thing. All right, does it have follow mode? This is another one that's a hot point of contention. It doesn't have follow mode on it. Now, that's not saying it can't have follow mode on it, because follow mode's based on the image it's seeing from the front screen and some programming inside the quad. My suspicion is this thing hit the market just like all their quads, and you're going to see other things added to it with firmware down the road. You can't add crash avoidance to it because it doesn't have the sensors. You could add follow mode to it because it does have a camera on the front. So it doesn't do follow mode today. Good chance it's going to do follow mode down the road. So again, that's just me speculating, but I know DJI pretty well, and that's a question I've asked them, and I wouldn't be shocked if it shows up in a future version. All right, the next question has to do with the controller, and people want to know how large a phone can I use in the controller. Now, what's cool about the controller is it's the same controller pretty much as they've used on all their Mavic products before. So the original Mavic Pro, the Mavic Air, the Mavic 2, the Spark, the other quads that are similar to that use the same controller. And it's very, I think, liberal in the size of the phone you can fit in it. So I've got an iPhone product. It's one of the larger iPhones that are out today. Easily fits into the handles right there. Now you'll notice there are two things you have to be concerned about with the size of phone you're putting in there. The first one has to do with how wide is it, and also how thick is it this way, because the arms only hold a certain thickness of phone. So if you have a really big case on it, like an OtterBox or something, you're gonna have a hard time jamming it in there. But know that even with a thick case like this that doesn't fit into the arms, you can see I'm not fully in the arms, the rubber inside there holds it pretty well. So you can put a big phone in there and it's gonna hold it okay. With this one, I've got a shell that I can pop off. It's a little thinner so I can actually slide it into the handles. So the honest answer is 6.3 inches. I'm not going to do the metric conversions. Sorry. I'm not good with the metric conversions, but 6.3 inches wide and 1/3 of an inch thick. That's the metric you've got. But having said that, if you're really concerned about not fitting in the handles, these inside pieces are rubber, so you could easily go after that with a nail file or small Dremel and widen that up a little bit to fit your phone in there if you're going to hang on to your phone for a while. So feel like you want to modify it, you can get in there and do it. Now the bigger question, which I found interesting, nobody asked, was can I use a tablet with it? And you can. And here's what I'll show you in a second. Let me get that out of the way. So curiously, the iPad Mini 4, which is my go-to device for flying most of my Mavic products, fits perfectly in the handles. Look at that. Isn't that neat? And it's held in there too. It's nice and tight. Now, it isn't by accident that it fits in there. I talk all the time about the brilliant design at DJI. There's little slits on the side over here, and when I first looked at the Mavic Pro, I wondered why those slits were there. Now, this one makes sense because you're plugging in the connector through that slit, but on this side, they didn't need to add that slit there, so I spent a lot of time thinking about it. Why would you put that in there? And it occurred to me that I've got a square tablet like this. I can't stick it in the handles, right? It'll only go that far. But because those slits are in there, boop, those little arms fall right through. So you can see the ear sticking through the slits. The iPad Mini 4 is the perfect companion for this thing because it fits in there great. It's naturally nestled in there and you can fly it. The one challenge you've got is that the connection that you need to make to the controller, you can't make it with the cable that's on there. It's too short. So again, being a nerd, I thought, well, I can fix that. We build a lot of products ourselves. We have companies we work with to manufacture things. Why don't I just come out with a longer cable? So we've manufactured these cables that are micro USB on one end up here, and you can have the flavor of whatever tablet you're using on the other end. In this case, it's an iPhone cable, and there you go. So it's a 30-centimeter cable that allows you to connect to the tablet and use a tablet like this that'll fit in your handles. It even works well if you use a tablet holder. A lot of companies out there, us included, sell a tablet holder where you can have the tablet above the controller. You need to extend that cable as well. This will work for both of those. So if you're interested in that, you're going to use the tablet, you can hit the website. We've got all different flavors out there. But I think that's pretty cool that they've made it, you know, accommodating enough to handle even the largest phones on the market and some of the smaller tablets as well. So that's your answer on the controller. The next one has to do with the weight. Now this was interesting because I didn't check the weight. I just took it on faith that it was 249 grams. And when somebody asked that, I thought, well, yeah, of course it's 249. They wrote that on the box. It's got to be 249 grams. Just like when I buy a car, I don't check the size of the gas tank against the specifications or even the cubic centimeters of the engine against the specifications. I take it on faith that if they say it, that it's true. But I don't know, maybe it's not. So let's weigh it. So I never did this. The first time I've done it was today. I brought out the scale, turned on the scale, kind of a high-tech scale where you can see the display there. It's at 0 right now, and it's set up for grams. So let me set the quad on top of it. And the minute I did that, I went into panic mode because it's 252 grams, which simple math would tell you is 3 grams over the 249 grams they're advertising. So I'm thinking, I've been talking about this thing on the channel about being a 249 gram quad, and it's heavier than that. But then I thought about it. Wait a minute. There's a gimbal guard on there. Let me pop that off. Because when I'm flying, remember it's takeoff weight, 249 grams. Let me put it on there without the gimbal guard. It's exactly 248 grams. So it is 249 or less, depending, I guess, on relative humidity of the room. But anyway, it's 248, 249 grams. The minute you put the gimbal lock on it, it's over to 249 grams. So people are saying, should we still register? My recommendation is register the drone. Just get the stupid registration out of the way. It's $5, takes you 5 minutes. You can fly 100 drones if you're a hobbyist on that $5 registration. The reason I'm saying that is because the minute you do anything to the drone, even probably put a sticker on it, on the side of it with your name on it, it's going to weigh more than 250 grams and you're going to be over the limit. If you use the cage around it for the prop guards, it's going to be over that weight. If you put any kind of clip on, there's a bunch of kits out there to customize it or stickers, it's going to be over the weight. So just, you know, spend the $5, register the drone. It's not the end of the world. All right, so that's it for the weight. Can I fly it with the DJI Go 4 application? You can't. I kind of explained that before. This is really designed to be flown with the new DJI Fly app. Now, that's not to say later on, one of the ways they may fix one of those first two questions about the smart control and the goggles is to enable us to be flown with the DJI Go 4 application. And that way, pilots like me that use a smart controller or goggles can use one application to fly on my quads. But right now, it's designed to use the DJI Go 4 app, the DJI Fly app, like I'd mentioned before, because specifically that's written for new pilots, and it's a simpler app to use. There's less buttons and controls on there, so it's less confusing when you're starting to fly. Next question is kind of related to that. Does Litchi work with it? Now, if you don't know what Litchi is, it's a wonderful application that will actually take control of the drone just like the DJI Fly application will, and allow you to do different things with it. You can set up missions, you can set up a bunch of different things. You can use it to display 3D goggles on a standard pair of goggles as opposed to the DJI goggles. So it's a pretty cool application. You would definitely want to look into it. The answer today is no, it doesn't, because it's not written to work with this particular drone. So I'll be testing that. I don't expect it's going to take them too long because there's an SDK or software development kit out for this where they're going to modify the Litchi to work with this. I'm sure there'll be other applications that come out as well that you can use with the drone, but right now Litchi doesn't work with it. The next question had to do with the controllers. A lot of you guys are like you're like Columbo. I'm dating myself here, but he was a popular guy back in the day that was always figuring things out. And you've looked online and figured out that there are multiple versions of that controller, and you're wondering why. The simple answer to that is that we in the US have FCC regulations, and they determine how powerful a transmitter can be, what frequencies it can operate on, and before a company can release a product, they've got to submit the transmitter to the FCC for testing to make sure that it's within the boundaries of what they specified and it doesn't violate the law. The FCC is only in the United States. There are other standard bodies and other parts of the world that'll certify other frequencies, other transmission topologies. So we're lucky in the US that it actually transmits on the 5.8 gigahertz band, which is a Wi-Fi band. The older, not older, but the other quads that are out there actually transmit on the 2.4 and 5.8, and they frequency hop between them. This one's only on the 5.8 frequency band for the US, but that's a strong band. That's going to give you really good results. Other parts of the world have both the 2.4 and 5.8, so that's why there's two different controllers. Now, the good news is, our version of it in the US flies way further than the other versions do. Some of those only fly a couple hundred yards because they've limited the transmitter power, or it's on a frequency that's congested or doesn't provide for that strong a transmitter in there. So the short answer is there are two versions of it because there's different standards all over the world. The good news out of that, though, is in the US we fly further than the other countries. The last two questions are kind of interesting because I agree with them, but I agree why they're not in there. So the one question is, why no 4K? And the last question is, why no OcuSync? And I guess the way I'll explain this is, I was in manufacturing for a long time. I'm an engineer. I've worked for some really big companies. I've been involved in product development. And I can tell you that there are really difficult conversations you have all the time when you're developing a product, no matter what it is, that have to balance price and functionality, right? And if you think of that in sort of an analogy as a seesaw, you've got the seesaw where on one side I've got price, the other side I've got functionality. And what you're trying to do is balance those two so the seesaw stays completely horizontal. The problem is with something like this and some of the products I've worked on, you have a third dimension you've got to consider. In this case, it's weight. In other cases, it's size. But if I've got price and value, right, features and value for price, that third dimension now gives me a seesaw that can pivot in any direction. So balancing price, features, and size, or in this case, weight, is almost an impossible task because everything I add changes the weight, changes the price, right? It gives me more value, but is it too much value for the price? And even if it's a good value for the price, is it adding weight that keeps me over that 249? So 4K and OcuSync would have required that. Now, I could make the argument that I've got a 1/2.3 sensor in there, and I know that that sensor can do 4K because it does it on other drones. It actually does it on the Mavic 2 Zoom. But it's not just the sensor, it's the sensor and the electronics behind it, because the information the sensor is capturing, how rich is that, how much megabits a second can it send back to the processor, then the processor that actually reads that sensor data and turns it into video can be expensive. So you've got a cost increase there. Also, this thing flies for 30 minutes because it's incredibly frugal on the amount of electrons it's drinking from those batteries. The minute I put a beefier processor in there to handle a 4K, I'm drinking more electrons. Now maybe I'm flying 28 minutes over the long haul. So it's that balancing act between how many features do I need in it, can I charge more for those and raise the price, and will it fly less, or will it be heavier? So I think they've done a really good job in balancing the feature sets because, again, at the end of the day, what they were going for here wasn't a simpler version of a complex drone that people fly today. So my recommendation, I've said this probably 50 times on the channel, if you're flying a drone today, Mavic Air Spark, Mavic 2, Anafi, Evo, any of those drones, probably not the drone for you because it's not going to measure up to what you're already used to in those other drones. You've already got very sophisticated quads you're flying. This thing is a simpler version of that. So it isn't something you'd add to your kit. Now I add it to my kit because I like the portability of it so I can take it on the road. I record in 2.7K or 1080p most days. So this is plenty fine for me on the road. It's very portable and it's easy to use, so I like it a lot. But the reason 4K and OcuSync aren't in there is because the market they're going for with this is the vast majority of people out there that don't fly today. Now, all of us that fly today are kind of a small chunk of the population. There's a lot of people out there that don't fly today, and they're looking to get into this hobby, but they don't want to dump a ton of money on it. So if their only choice is to buy a $1,000 drone, on the off chance that they're going to like flying, they're probably going to hold back. And what they'll end up doing is borrowing a drone from a friend. I lend drones all the time that people love it and they fly it. But what they're trying to do with this drone is to build a drone and most people can afford. And all they want to do, I think, the average consumer, is to buy one that they can fly easily, take on vacation, capture some beautiful footage from up in the air. And I promise you, a lot of those people are going to fly this thing, fall in love with the hobby like all of us have, and they're going to upgrade to something better later on. It's sort of like when you buy your first camera. It's not the most expensive camera, but when you realize you can take better pictures by buying a little more expensive camera and having control over how those pictures are taken and snap a lens on the front, maybe you're going to upgrade. So hopefully these people that start with this drone are going to upgrade later on and really enjoy that experience. But for me, at the end of the day, all I ever care about, no matter what you're flying, is that you're up in the air, you're enjoying the freedom that provides, and I can't put a drone up in the air without smiling ear to ear, because it's just that enlightening experience for me. It's a life-changing experience in so many ways, to experience vistas and rivers and forests and oceans and stuff from 150, 200 feet in the air. It's just an amazing experience. So I'm hoping that the vast majority of people that aren't flying today are going to find enough value in this to buy it, to go out there and fly, and really, really enjoy the hobby like all of us do. So that was the last question. I'm sorry it took a little longer on some of those than I did on others, and I was editorializing a little bit as well, but I love putting these kind of clips together, and I promise you, I hope you get value out of these, because that's what drives me. So if you have questions I didn't get to today, drop them in the comments below. I promise to get to them eventually. I'll do my best to get another clip up pretty quickly to answer these. Stay tuned to the channel, because I have a ton more clips coming on this technology and a whole lot of other high-tech stuff that I love talking about. So if you're enjoying this, please stop back soon. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, you might want to hit that subscribe button down there. Turn the bell on too, because we're going to be posting a lot of stuff. And if you're curious about it, you'll know that we've posted something. You can come back and watch it. And that's pretty much it for today. So we have that cable. I mentioned it briefly. That's on the website. If you need other accessories for the Mavic Mini, we have those on the website as well. But for today, that's pretty much it. So thanks an awful lot for watching. I hope you found value in the clip. And until next time, happy flying.